Are altcoins about to catch up with Bitcoin? Let's discuss. Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about the possibility of altcoins playing some catch up with Bitcoin as Bitcoin has gone on this major rally in the last week or two. So it's become a bit of a meme in crypto, really ever since the bear market back here began, to say that alt season is here. Basically every single pump during this bear market phase and even up through here, you'd have people saying, all right, alt season is coming, alt season's coming, alt season is coming. We're going to see all these alts start to catch up with Bitcoin and really rally. And it's not really materialized. You might see a handful of different altcoins rally, but nothing sustainable, nothing too widespread. And then a lot of altcoins just go set in new lows, new lows, new lows. So I think we're at a position where now most people just don't even believe that alt season can happen anymore, that we've been seeing these behaviors where where Bitcoin rips but altcoins dump. And so to think that that could be different this time, I think a lot of people don't really see that as being the case. And certainly we've seen Bitcoin dominance just ripping to the upside for quite a while now. And this is just going along with that idea where when Bitcoin's doing well, that does not mean that altcoins are going to follow along. And you actually have Bitcoin taking up a greater and greater share of the total crypto market cap because it is outperforming alts left, right, and center. So should we think that altcoins, so I'm showing you here total 3 minus the major stable coins, altcoins which have really not done anything particularly important or relevant for a while now, that the kind of total crypto market cap for altcoins has been relatively just stuck in this range, just doing nothing while Bitcoin has been moving up. Is there any reason for us to think that this time might be at all different? So that's what I want to talk about. So the first thing I think is important to mention is that for altcoins, when you're in maybe the early stages of a bull market, I think a lot of people misconstrue something like Bitcoin dominance to say that just because Bitcoin dominance is going up, that means that altcoins must continue to go down and set new lows, new lows, new lows relative to the dollar and against Bitcoin. And so against Bitcoin, you will see a lot of them continue to bleed if dominance is going up. But against the US dollar, that's not necessarily the case. So what I want to show you here real quick is just overlay Bitcoin on top of total 3 here minus those major stable coins. And what you'll notice is that in this early bull market phase coming out of the March 2020 lows here, you'll see that both moved up together. So the orange line here is Bitcoin, and then the candles are the total altcoin market. And it was the case that Bitcoin went parabolic before altcoins did, so it really left them in the dust, went ripping to the upside, then they followed suit later. But they were moving up in market cap, and then in their individual charts, a lot of them were moving up against the US dollar. So even though they may have been getting outperformed by Bitcoin through here, it wasn't that they were just continuing to go lower and lower and lower. And certainly in that kind of environment, if one already had a large Bitcoin stack that they were happy with to then ride up, then maybe any other accumulation would have been better put into those altcoins as they were lagging behind before they rip off to the upside. Now, this is an extreme situation because this is that full-throated bull market that we're talking about here, whereas more of the environment we're talking about right now might be something that's back before that, maybe kind of leading into something like that. But I do just want to make that point because I think a lot of people claim that when you see Bitcoin dominance rallying this hard, they're just going to continue to see altcoins bleed against the US dollar. That is not necessarily the case. They will probably be bleeding against Bitcoin through here, but not necessarily against the USD. So it really depends on how one wants to be evaluating their portfolio. If you're already happy with your Bitcoin bag and you want to be accumulating an asset that maybe has higher upside in a longer term perspective, then it actually could be rational to be adding to altcoin stacks that you think have some long-term potential, even if that means you're going to be taking some underperformance relative to Bitcoin in the short term. And especially what can be useful is when you're getting those altcoins, when they've stopped bleeding against the dollar, at the very least, you're not going to be losing dollar value in your portfolio, even if you are losing potential Bitcoin value. So who knows what's going to happen? We could certainly see Bitcoin dominance continue to run and Bitcoin continue to outperform the altcoin market. But I think we also might be at a place where the altcoin market has been so devastated in this bear market and really just been left for dead that some mean reversion could happen, and certainly a revisiting of this upper end of the range here could be possible. So with that in mind, let's talk about some specific altcoins. So there are a few that I want to talk about here. Now, ETH I do not consider to be an altcoin, but I just want to mention this real quick. In my last video, I talked about how I thought Ethereum might be stacked up well to start to catch up to Bitcoin. And certainly that has been playing out. Now, it's not performing as well as Bitcoin through here, but it has been moving up, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it continue higher. So I'm showing you here is our short-term upside downside potential indicator. It's one of our risk models we have at our website, claritydigital.io. We'll leave a link in the description if you want to go and check that out. Basically, higher values mean higher risk, lower values mean lower risk. And this is short-term. It's caring about moves that play out over days to weeks, so much more short-term in this time preference. What you'll see is that short-term UDPI is coming off of a pretty low value and is still sitting pretty low. That in these prior pumps that we've seen with Ethereum, we're not even at really the lowest one that we've seen in this year, being up over here at about 0 was where this one tapped out. And these other ones have all gotten up above 0. And so I think it's quite reasonable to think that Ethereum, that if Bitcoin stays bullish, and especially if Bitcoin makes an additional move up here to a higher level above the mid 30Ks, that you would at some point then see Ethereum start to play catch up, its short-term UDPI move up to some of these levels over here, and that might be where you'd expect that local top before it has a correction. So we're not there yet. I think some more movement to the upside on Ethereum is plausible from here. But then if we move beyond Ethereum, we talk about more just altcoins as a lot of people would define it, there's some things we can look at. So first I wanted to talk about Link, because Link was one of the altcoins that performed especially well in this rally with Bitcoin. That Link was one of the few assets that actually was able to not only keep pace, but really outperform Bitcoin going through here. And so when you look at Link's short-term UDPI, one of the things I've been mentioning through this entire range that Link was in for well over a year through here, is how symmetrical the short-term UDPI was. That once you got up to these zones here, that tended to be when you caught these local tops, and then these local bottoms tended to form down at these similar levels as well. Now, what's notable about this breakout that we've had above that range is we've also seen a breakout in the short-term UDPI. It has moved to higher levels, and we might now think that it might be finding resistance or looking for resistance at one of these higher levels that's happened before. For example, up at around 1, which is what we've seen in the past many times before, local tops forming at around that level. And so Link is one where I think a big move has happened, and so it wouldn't surprise me with Link for it to catch a local top here and maybe have to slow down, have to consolidate, maybe even go back down, test some lower levels before it can start moving back to the upside and allow for a short-term risk to cool off. But this is the first example where we've seen some altcoins really doing well here, and to a greater degree than we saw in the past. It's notable that Link broke out of this range during this run, whereas every other time we saw Bitcoin putting in these runs this year, Link just tapped out at the top of its range. It did not actually break out. So this time has been different in terms of Link, and that is something that I think is notable. And it's also notable that there's been some other altcoins that have been showing a lot of strength here as well. So here I'm showing you RNDR. This is one that did really well off of the AI hype. So coming out of the beginning of the year, it went absolutely crazy, had a massive rally into the beginning of the year, cooled off, had another big move up, and now it's starting to move up as well. It's starting to really rally as well. And so this one is one that I think might be kind of a step behind Link, where Link already had its breakout, moving back up, showing a lot of strength. I think something like Render, which has already shown its ability to be able to move up in this kind of bearish environment, to be able to really have some aggressive rallies. It wouldn't surprise me for an asset like this to be able to break up above these levels and test some higher levels here. And with that, I'd also expect a short-term UDPI to not only maybe test some of these levels, but maybe move on to some of these higher levels over here as well. Time will tell, of course, but it wouldn't surprise me. And that's one of the things I think we might see, if we're going to see altcoins start to do something more impressive here. It might be the ones that have shown some relative strength already this year that are the first ones to really get benefit from that people pile into the ones that they think look more bullish, and then maybe eventually the money flows down into ones that haven't done as much. So this is one of the ones that I'm watching as well. I'm going to be seeing, and I think at the least I would expect the short-term UDPI to revisit some of these higher levels here before we might see a correction. Another one that I'm keeping an eye on is FET. So this is one, so this is Fetch AI, another one that really caught a bid off of the AI hype going into from the beginning of this year. And this is another one that is starting to really push to the upside. Now this one's not as close to breaking out of that previous high from the beginning of the year, but it's getting there. And we're seeing its short-term UDPI break out above where it tapped out on these local tops here. And again, where I'd expect it to be able to target maybe some of these higher levels before we see it find a local top. So showing a lot of strength, even just today, as I record this, moving up, continuing to move up. One of the ones that I am watching for sure. And then I might expect a local top to form at some of these higher levels. And if you want to watch these models in real time for yourself to see when we're getting to those levels, you can go over to our website, polaritydigital.io, and if you sign up for a Polarity Digital Pro subscription service, you can watch all of these models in real time and more. So a final asset I want to talk about is one that hasn't moved as much, but maybe there's some potential it could. And this is less about it specifically, more of this type of asset, ones that haven't really moved. So I had some recommendations, some people asking that I talk about XRP, so I figured I'd talk about this here. Haven't talked about it a whole lot on the channel, so I figured I'd talk about it here. And this is, XRP is one that I think is interesting to watch of this, not just XRP itself, but as I mentioned, kind of being emblematic of a lot of altcoins that haven't really been doing anything impressive yet with this run, but maybe could. So XRP is, of course, an interesting asset just because it's one that has a super strong community, really forged in the fire of what was the SEC lawsuit, which finally resolved in XRP's favor. But being in the current type of market situation we're in, it has not really been able to really move aggressively and sustainably to the upside based on that bullish news. And so we really retraced that entire pump that we had based off of that ruling. But now we're wondering, can XRP start to move to the upside? And what's notable about XRP is that starting from a short-term UDPI position that's pretty low, down here at negative 2.29, which is considerably lower than some of these other altcoins I was talking about, which are, for example, FET is already up at 1.16 on the short-term UDPI. Render is at negative 0.65. And we're seeing Link up at about 1.48. So these are already getting more extended, and certainly in more bearish situations, these are about kind of chewing up a lot of that upside you'd expect. You wouldn't think that they'd be getting up to a score of 5 during this kind of not full-on bull market type of situation here. And so one of the things that you'll note about XRP is it's starting from a lower position, which just means that if it wants to run, it might have a larger degree of upside that it could realize in that short term, starting from this position. And so what I think we might end up seeing, if we're just going to watch this, is that something like XRP, if we see another leg up for Bitcoin, we start seeing maybe Bitcoin dominance might initially go up with that pump, but then start to fall as other altcoins rally. And maybe those other altcoins tend to be these other ones that have already shown some strength, even going up and showing even more relative performance, even chewing up even more short-term upside potential. These different ones that I've talked about, in addition to potentially some other ones that have been running more recently. Then what you might see is that there's suddenly be a bit of a shift in sentiment. People start saying, oh, wait a minute, altcoins are actually doing something. Look at all these specific examples that have been running. Now it's time for me to try to front run the next pump. And that's where you might see something like XRP and some of the other ones that have been really hammered and not really doing anything super impressive yet. For example, Polkadot or some of those kind of assets. Maybe that's when that would end up happening. And so that's kind of the way that you might see that money flow happen. Now, it's not guaranteed that it would. One of the things that you could just see is that it just continue to be a Bitcoin-only show, Bitcoin running up and sucking all the liquidity out of the crypto market, really drawing it into itself, moving up higher and higher and higher, and these other altcoins don't really run. But I do think it's reasonable to think that it's at least possible. It's a reasonable hypothesis to have, to think that maybe at some point, especially if Bitcoin moves up again, people decide that they want to start trying to take larger risks, try to compound their gains, maybe take some profits off of Bitcoin as it moves up to higher levels, and then move that into not only something like maybe Ethereum next, which could run in addition to some of these altcoins that have already been running, but then take it into altcoins that haven't really run so much yet, but certainly could. And so XRP, I think, is an additional interesting one to talk about because there's such a huge community. There could be a big buying base that the second that XRP could start pumping, maybe a lot of people FOMO in, really start to pump the price up higher. Now, none of that obviously is guaranteed, and a lot of that is dependent on Bitcoin to continue to be bullish and move higher, and it not, for example, follow the stock market, which has not been doing so well and starting to move lower. So we'll have to wait and see how this plays out. But certainly, I think if we see something like Ethereum starting to play catch up in a major way and continued strong performance from these already strong performers, that's where I think it's more likely that a more broader base altcoin move could happen. Not saying it would be a long-term thing, and certainly not thinking that's going to be something that takes us to new all-time highs with most altcoins, but at least something that's more worthy of being called an alt season than what we've seen in the past, in the more recent past. All right, so obviously none of that's financial advice. You should make your own opinions. And if you want to check out these models for yourself, you can go over to our website, polaritydigital.io. Again, link is in the description. So if you like the content, remember to give the video a like, follow us on Twitter, a lot of updates about indicators and more over there, and subscribe to the channel.